I watched through my kitchen window as a white pickup truck with Martinez Construction painted on the side pulled up to the edge of my property, and my stomach dropped when I saw Linda Crawford from the HOA step out of her Mercedes right behind it. This was going to be bad. My name is Derek Johnson, and I had been living in the Oakwood Hills subdivision in Scottsdale, Arizona for 3 years. I bought the house because of the beautiful desert views and the spacious yard that backed up to protected wilderness. What I did not anticipate was that Linda Crawford would become HOA president 2 years ago and turn my peaceful existence into a living nightmare. She was a 52-year-old woman with an asymmetrical blonde bob that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and she had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable. It started small. First, she sent me violation notices about my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. Then it was my front door wreath being too large by ½ an inch. After that, she claimed my desert landscaping was not within HOA guidelines, even though I had the approval documents from the previous board. Every month brought a new complaint, a new fine, a new threat. But this, watching her point at my property line while talking to a contractor, was something else entirely. I walked outside, my heart pounding. The morning sun was already heating up the desert, and it was only 8 in the morning. I could see the contractor, a middle-aged Hispanic man with weathered hands and a tired expression, looking at whatever Linda was showing him on her tablet. "Can I help you?" I called out as I approached. Linda turned to me with that smile she always wore, the one that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Derek, good morning. I was just explaining to Mr. Martinez here about the property line correction that needs to happen." "Property line correction?" I repeated, feeling my jaw clench. "What are you talking about?" She gestured broadly at my side yard. "According to the HOA's recent survey, your fence is encroaching on common area property by approximately 6 feet. We need to have it moved to the correct location." I stared at her in disbelief. "Linda, my fence has been in this exact spot since before I bought the house. The previous owners built it 15 years ago." "Well, unfortunately, they built it in the wrong place," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The HOA is responsible for maintaining accurate property boundaries, and we have determined that your fence needs to be relocated." Mr. Martinez was looking increasingly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I turned to him. "Did she hire you to move my fence?" He nodded slowly. "She said she had the authority from the Homeowners Association to make corrections to property lines." "Let me show you something," I said, already heading back toward my house. "Do not do anything until I get back." I practically ran into my house, my mind racing. When I bought the property, I had paid for a professional survey because I wanted to know exactly what I was purchasing. The survey stakes were still in place, marked with bright orange caps positioned around my entire property. I grabbed the survey documents from my filing cabinet and rushed back outside. Linda looked annoyed at my return. "Derek, this really is not necessary. The HOA has the authority to—" "Here," I interrupted, thrusting the survey documents at Mr. Martinez. "This is a professional survey I had done 3 years ago by Barrett & Associates, a licensed surveying company here in Scottsdale. The stakes are still in place. Would you like to see them?" The contractor took the papers and studied them carefully. His eyes widened slightly as he read through the documentation. "These are certified survey documents," he said to Linda, "and they show the fence is within the property line." "That survey is old," Linda snapped. "The HOA's survey is more recent and more accurate." "Can I see your survey?" Mr. Martinez asked her. Linda hesitated, her fingers tightening on her tablet. "It is on file with the HOA. I do not have it with me right now." "But you said you had documentation," the contractor said, his voice taking on a firmer tone. "Madam, I cannot move a fence without seeing proof that it is actually in the wrong location. If this gentleman has certified survey stakes on his property, and you are asking me to move his fence beyond those stakes, that would be altering his legal property line. That could be criminal trespassing and property damage." I felt a surge of relief. This contractor knew what he was doing, and more importantly, he was not going to be bullied by Linda. Her face flushed red. "I am the HOA president, and I am telling you that the fence needs to be moved." "Then show me the survey that proves it," Mr. Martinez said calmly. Show me documentation that contradicts his certified survey, because right now, all I see is that his fence is exactly where it should be, according to legal documents. Let me show you the stakes, I said to the contractor. They are right here. We walked along my property line, and I pointed out each orange-capped stake that marked the corners and boundaries of my lot. Mr. Martinez examined them carefully, comparing them to the measurements on my survey documents. He even pulled out a measuring tape and checked several distances. These stakes are professionally placed, he said finally, and they match your survey exactly. Your fence is about a foot inside your property line, which means you actually have some extra space you could have used. Linda was fuming now. This is ridiculous. I am the HOA president, and I demand that you do the work I hired you for. Madam, I cannot and will not move a fence that is legally placed on private property, Mr. Martinez said firmly. If I did, I could be sued for property damage, and I could lose my contractor's license. I am sorry, but I cannot help you. Fine, Linda spat. I will find someone else who will actually do their job. Good luck with that, Mr. Martinez said. Any reputable contractor is going to ask the same questions I did, and if you find someone who will do it without proper documentation, they are probably not licensed. Linda glared at both of us, then stomped back to her Mercedes and drove off, tires squealing slightly on the pavement. Mr. Martinez watched her go, then turned to me. Sir, I apologize for the confusion, he said. I had no idea what I was walking into. She called me yesterday and said she needed fence relocation work done for the HOA. She made it sound like a straightforward job. It is not your fault, I assured him. Linda has been harassing me for 2 years. This is just her latest attempt. He shook his head. Between you and me, I have done work in a lot of HOA communities, and I have seen some petty stuff. But trying to get someone to move property line markers, that is serious. That is fraud. His words echoed in my mind after he left. Fraud? Was that what Linda was trying to do? Was she actually attempting to steal part of my property? I went back inside and called my real estate attorney, Marcus Feldman. I had used him when I bought the house, and I trusted him. His secretary put me through right away. Derek, what can I do for you? Marcus asked. I explained everything that had happened that morning, from Linda showing up with the contractor to her claims about the HOA's survey, to the contractor refusing to do the work once he saw my survey stakes. Marcus was quiet for a moment after I finished. Derek, what she was attempting to do could constitute several crimes: fraud, theft, destruction of property markers. Those survey stakes are legally protected. It is a crime to alter or destroy them. What should I do? I asked. First, document everything. Take photos of your survey stakes. Make sure they are clearly marked with dates. Get a written statement from that contractor about what Linda asked him to do. Second, I want you to file a complaint with the HOA board. Put everything in writing. Third, let me reach out to the HOA's attorney. They need to know what their president is doing. I spent the rest of the morning taking detailed photographs of every survey stake on my property. I measured the fence line and documented how it was well within my legal boundaries. I also emailed Mr. Martinez and asked if he would be willing to provide a written statement about what happened. He replied within an hour, saying he would be happy to do so, and that he found Linda's behavior concerning. That afternoon, I drafted a formal complaint to the HOA board. Oakwood Hills had a 5-member board with Linda as president. The other members were Robert Chen, the vice president, Margaret Sullivan, the secretary, Thomas Baker, the treasurer, and Janet Pierce, a general board member. I had met them all at various HOA meetings, though Linda dominated most discussions. In my complaint, I detailed the morning's events, attached photos of my survey stakes and the survey documents, and requested an immediate investigation into Linda's actions. I also requested that Linda be prohibited from taking any further action regarding my property without full board approval. I emailed it to all 5 board members and copied my attorney. The response came faster than I expected. Robert Chen called me that evening. Derek, I just read your complaint, he said, his voice tight with stress. I need to know if everything you wrote is accurate. Every word, I confirmed. I have photos, documents, and a statement from the contractor she hired. Jesus, Robert muttered. Derek, can I be honest with you? Several of us on the board have been concerned about Linda's behavior for a while now. She's been making decisions without board approval, spending HOA funds without authorization. But this is beyond anything we suspected. What are you going to do? I asked. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night, Robert said. This cannot wait. Can you attend and present your evidence? Absolutely, I said. The next evening, I walked into the Oakwood Hills Community Center with a folder full of documents and a USB drive containing all my photos. The 5 board members were already seated at the front table, and Linda looked like she wanted to set me on fire with her eyes. About 20 other residents were scattered in the chairs, curious about why an emergency meeting had been called. Robert Chen called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming on short notice. We are here to discuss a serious complaint filed by Derek Johnson regarding actions taken by our HOA president. Derek, would you please present your complaint? I stood up and walked to the front, connecting my USB drive to the projector. I showed the photos of my survey stakes, explained how Linda had hired a contractor to move my fence beyond my property line, and played a recording I had made of Mr. Martinez describing what Linda had asked him to do. The room was silent when I finished. Several residents were staring at Linda with shocked expressions. Linda, do you have a response? Robert asked. Linda stood up, her face flushed. This is completely overblown. I was simply trying to ensure that our common areas are properly maintained. There has been confusion about property lines in this section of the neighborhood, and I was attempting to correct it. Do you have a survey that shows Derek's fence is on common area property? Margaret Sullivan, the secretary, asked. The HOA had a survey done last month, Linda said. I have reviewed our financial records, Thomas Baker, the treasurer, interrupted. There is no expense for a survey in last month's records, or any month in the past year. Linda's face went even redder. It was a preliminary assessment. By whom? Robert asked. I do not have to answer these questions, Linda snapped. As president, I have the authority to manage HOA property as I see fit. Actually, you do not, Janet Pierce spoke up. She was a retired attorney in her late 60s with sharp eyes. The HOA bylaws require board approval for any expenditure over $500 and for any action that affects property boundaries. You violated both of those requirements. I was acting in the best interest of the HOA, Linda insisted. By trying to steal part of my property, I interjected, because that is what you were doing. You were trying to move my fence beyond my legal property line, which would have either made me think I had less property than I actually do, or would have given the HOA land that does not belong to it. That's absurd, Linda said, but her voice wavered. Robert Chen pulled out a document. Linda, I did some research today. Moving or destroying survey markers is a crime under Arizona Revised Statute 131602. It is classified as criminal damage. Attempting to fraudulently alter property boundaries is theft under Arizona Revised Statute 131802. What you attempted to do is not just a violation of HOA rules, it is potentially criminal. The room erupted in murmurs. Linda stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I move that we vote to remove Linda Crawford as HOA president, effective immediately, Janet Pierce said. I second, Margaret Sullivan added. All in favor? Robert asked. 4 hands went up, everyone except Linda. The motion passes, Robert said. Linda, you are removed as HOA president. Please turn over all HOA documents, keys, and access credentials to me by tomorrow evening. Linda grabbed her purse and stormed out of the community center without another word. Several residents actually applauded. After the meeting, Robert approached me. Derek, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. We should have reined Linda in months ago. What happens now? I asked. We need to investigate all of her actions as president, Robert said. I am worried about what else we might find. He was right to be worried. Over the next 2 weeks, as the board conducted a thorough review of Linda's tenure as president, they discovered a horrifying pattern of abuse. She had issued over 200 violation notices in 2 years, many for infractions that did not actually exist in the HOA rules. She had collected thousands of dollars in fines that were never properly documented or deposited. She had spent HOA funds on personal expenses, including charging meals and shopping trips to the HOA credit card. And I was not the only resident she had targeted for property harassment. She had sent violation notices to 6 other homeowners claiming various boundary disputes, all of which were baseless. The board hired a forensic accountant who discovered that Linda had embezzled nearly $45,000 from the HOA over 2 years. They had no choice but to report it to the police. I was sitting on my back patio 2 weeks after the emergency board meeting when my phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Morrison from the Scottsdale Police Department. "Mr. Johnson, I am calling about the case involving Linda Crawford and the Oakwood Hills HOA," she said. "I need to get a statement from you about the property line incident." I met with Detective Morrison the next day and walked her through everything that had happened. I showed her the photos, the survey documents, and the written statement from Mr. Martinez. She took notes and photographs of her own. "Mr. Johnson, you should know that we are building a case against Ms. Crawford for multiple offenses," Detective Morrison said. "What she tried to do to your property is part of a larger pattern of fraud and embezzlement. The HOA has provided us with extensive documentation." "Will I have to testify?" I asked. "Possibly, if this goes to trial," she said. "But there is a good chance she will take a plea deal once she sees the evidence against her." Life slowly returned to normal in Oakwood Hills. Robert Chen became the new HOA president, and one of the first things he did was issue a formal apology to everyone who had received frivolous violations from Linda. The board also instituted new oversight procedures to prevent any single board member from having too much unchecked authority. About 6 weeks after the emergency board meeting, I was getting my mail when I saw a Scottsdale police cruiser pull up to Linda's house, which was about 4 streets over from mine. I did not go over to watch, but I heard from neighbors later that day that Linda had been arrested. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and attempted criminal damage for trying to alter property boundaries. The story made the local news. "Former HOA president arrested for embezzlement" was the headline in the Scottsdale Independent. The article detailed how Linda had systematically abused her position, stolen HOA funds, and harassed residents. My case was mentioned specifically, with the reporter noting how a contractor's refusal to break the law had helped expose the fraud. Mr. Martinez even got a nice quote in the article. "I have been in the construction business for 25 years, he said. "You learn early on that if someone is asking you to do something that does not feel right, you need to verify everything. Those survey stakes saved me from making a huge mistake." Linda's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not feeling generous. There were too many victims, too much money stolen, and too many fraudulent acts. The case went to trial 4 months after her arrest. I did have to testify. Walking into the Maricopa County Courthouse was intimidating, but my attorney Marcus Feldman prepared me well. I explained to the jury exactly what had happened that morning when Linda showed up with the contractor. I showed them the photos of my survey stakes. I described how the contractor had refused to do the work once he saw the legal documentation. The prosecutor, an intense woman named Elizabeth Park, asked me, "Mr. Johnson, in your opinion, what was Ms. Crawford trying to accomplish by moving your fence beyond your property line?" "Objection calls for speculation," Linda's attorney said. "I will rephrase, Ms." Park said smoothly. "Mr. Johnson, what would have been the result if your fence had been moved beyond your survey stakes as Ms. Crawford requested? Either the HOA would have gained land that legally belonged to me, or I would have lost use of part of my property that I legally own," I said. "Either way, it would have been theft of my property." Mr. Martinez also testified, describing how Linda had hired him under false pretenses and become angry when he refused to move the fence without proper documentation. The forensic accountant testified about the embezzled funds. Several other residents testified about bogus violation notices and harassment. The trial lasted a week. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Linda was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus fines. As I sat in the courtroom and watched the bailiff lead her away in handcuffs, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that she could not hurt anyone else. Sadness that someone had let power corrupt them so completely. After the trial, the HOA held a special meeting to discuss reforms. Robert Chen addressed a packed community center. "What happened with Linda Crawford was a failure at every level," he said. "A failure of oversight, a failure of accountability, a failure to listen when residents raised concerns. We are implementing new rules to make sure this never happens again. No single board member will have access to HOA funds without dual authorization. All violation notices must be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being issued, and we are establishing a resident appeals process for anyone who believes they have been unfairly targeted. The changes were approved unanimously. The HOA also voted to use the restitution money from Linda to repay all the residents who had been charged fraudulent fines and to make improvements to the community center. My life returned to something resembling peace. The new board was reasonable and professional. They focused on actual community needs, like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, rather than harassing residents over minor issues. About 6 months after Linda's sentencing, I was working in my yard when a car pulled up. An older couple got out, both looking around with interest. "Can I help you?" I called out. "Hi, we were thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood," the man said. "We saw the house for sale down the street. How do you like living here?" I thought about everything that had happened, the harassment, the stress, the trial. But I also thought about the reforms, the new board, the community coming together to fix what had been broken. "It is a good neighborhood," I said honestly. "We had some problems with HOA leadership, but the community dealt with it. The current board is excellent. They actually care about making this a nice place to live, not just enforcing petty rules." The woman smiled. "We read about what happened with your former HOA president. That must have been stressful." "It was," I admitted, "but it also showed me that when you stand up for yourself and document everything, the truth comes out. And having a good contractor who refuses to do shady work definitely helps." They laughed. We chatted for a few more minutes, and I told them about the amenities, the schools nearby, the hiking trails in the protected wilderness area behind the neighborhood. They seemed genuinely interested. After they left, I walked along my fence line, looking at those orange-capped survey stakes. Such small things, just plastic caps on metal posts driven into the ground. But they had saved me from having my property stolen, exposed a corrupt HOA president, and helped protect my entire community from future abuse. I took a photo of one of the stakes and texted it to Mr. Martinez with a message. "Thanks again for refusing to move my fence. You helped save a lot of people from a corrupt HOA president," he replied a few minutes later. "Just doing the right thing. That is what we are supposed to do. Hope you are doing well." That evening, I sat on my back patio, watching the sun set over the desert. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, the saguaro cacti silhouetted against the colorful backdrop. This view was one of the reasons I bought this house, this specific property with this specific lot line. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Robert Chen with the subject line, HOA newsletter. I opened it and scanned the contents. The newsletter talked about upcoming community events, reminded residents about pool hours, and discussed plans for new desert landscaping in the common areas. At the bottom was a section titled, "A Message from Your HOA Board." It has been 6 months since we implemented new oversight procedures and reformed how our HOA operates, it read. "We have not issued a single violation notice in that time, not because violations have not occurred, but because we have chosen to approach issues with education and cooperation rather than punishment and fines. We have learned that HOAs function best when they serve residents, not control them. Thank you all for your patience as we rebuilt trust in our community leadership." I smiled and set my phone down. This was what an HOA should be. A group of neighbors working together to maintain shared spaces and build community, not a petty dictatorship using arbitrary rules to harass people. The next morning, I was making coffee when I saw a familiar white pickup truck with Martinez Construction on the side drive slowly past my house. Mr. Martinez saw me through the window and waved. I waved back, then went outside. He pulled over and rolled down his window. "Morning, Derek. I'm actually here to look at a job 2 streets over, some deck repair work. Figured I would say hello since I was in the neighborhood." "Good to see you," I said. "The HOA treating you well?" He grinned. "Much better than the last time I was here. The new board actually had me come out to give estimates on some repair work for the community center. They were professional, had clear specifications, paid promptly. Night and day from dealing with Linda Crawford." That is great, I said. You deserve to work with people who respect your expertise. Speaking of which, Mr. Martinez said, I have been telling that story to every contractor I know about the survey stakes and refusing to move the fence. You would be surprised how many guys have similar stories about being asked to do shady work by HOAs or property managers. Most of us just quietly refuse and move on. But what happened here? With her getting arrested and everything, it has become kind of legendary in the contractor community. I laughed. I never thought I would become a legend in the contractor community. Well, you and those orange survey stakes, he said with a grin. I have started telling every homeowner who hires me to get a professional survey done and keep those stakes maintained. You never know when someone might try to mess with your property. After he drove off, I thought about his words. How many other homeowners had Linda tried to scam? How many other HOAs across the country were run by petty tyrants who abused their power? The news was full of HOA horror stories, neighborhoods where residents were fined for having the wrong color flowers or for parking in their own driveways. I decided to write an article about my experience for the local newspaper. Not to shame Linda or to celebrate her downfall, but to educate other homeowners about protecting themselves. I titled it, How Survey Stakes Saved My Property from HOA Fraud. The Scottsdale Independent published it 2 weeks later. In it, I detailed the importance of getting a professional survey, maintaining visible property markers, documenting everything when dealing with an HOA, and knowing your legal rights. I also emphasized the importance of HOA, board oversight, and resident involvement. The article got a lot of attention, both locally and online. I received emails from homeowners across Arizona and even other states, thanking me for sharing my story and asking for advice. Several real estate attorneys contacted me to say they were using my article to educate their clients. One email particularly stood out. It was from a woman named Patricia Nguyen in Phoenix. Mr. Johnson, I just read your article, and I am crying with relief, she wrote. My HOA president has been telling me for months that my detached garage is on common property and needs to be removed. I have been terrified because I cannot afford to tear down and rebuild the garage. After reading your article, I immediately hired a surveyor. He came out yesterday and confirmed that my garage is completely within my property lines. The HOA president has been lying to me. I am filing a complaint with my board today. Thank you for giving me the knowledge to fight back. I replied to her email, encouraging her to document everything and to consult with a real estate attorney if needed. I also suggested she contact Detective Morrison at the Scottsdale Police Department, who might be interested to know if there was another HOA president engaging in similar fraud. About a month later, Patricia emailed me again. Her HOA president had been removed from the board after an investigation revealed he had been trying to pressure several homeowners into selling their properties to a development company that he had a financial interest in. The property line claims were part of his scheme to decrease property values and make residents desperate to sell. More good news came from Oakwood Hills as well. The couple I had talked to in my yard bought the house down the street. They introduced themselves properly after moving in. Jim and Carol Patterson, retired teachers from Minnesota looking to enjoy Arizona's warm winters. They told me that my conversation with them and my honest assessment of the neighborhood had been a major factor in their decision to buy. We figured any community that could identify a problem and fix it was worth being part of, Jim said. They became good friends. Carol even joined the HOA board a year later, bringing her organized mind and teaching experience to help develop better communication with residents. Life in Oakwood Hills continued to improve. The board used money from Linda's restitution to renovate the community pool, add new playground equipment, and create a dog park that residents had been requesting for years. They also organized regular social events, including a monthly food truck night and a quarterly neighborhood garage sale. I ran into Robert Chen at one of the food truck nights, about 18 months after Linda's arrest. We got tacos and sat at one of the picnic tables the HOA had installed in the common area. You know, Derek, I wanted to thank you again, Robert said between bites. If you had not stood up to Linda that day, if you had not documented everything and pushed for accountability, she probably would have continued stealing from us for years. And who knows how much worse it would have gotten. I just protected my property, I said. I did not set out to take down a corrupt HOA president. Maybe not, but that is what happened, Robert said. And it made all of us better. We actually function like a community now. People trust the board, they come to meetings, they volunteer. That did not happen when Linda was in charge because everyone was too afraid of getting on her bad side. He was right. The change in the neighborhood was palpable. Where before residents had been isolated and fearful, now people actually talked to each other, helped each other, organized block parties. The HOA had transformed from an oppressive force into what it should have been all along, a helpful organization that maintained shared resources and built community connections. I kept my survey stakes clearly marked and visible. Every few months I would check on them, make sure the orange caps were still bright and noticeable. They had become something of a symbol in the neighborhood. Other residents started getting surveys done on their properties too, marking their boundaries clearly. Several told me they felt more secure, knowing exactly where their property lines were and having legal documentation to prove it. 2 years after the trial, I received a letter from the Arizona State Bar Association. They were hosting a continuing education seminar for real estate attorneys about property rights and HOA conflicts, and they wanted me to speak about my experience. I was hesitant at first. Public speaking was not my strong suit, but Marcus Feldman encouraged me to do it. "Your story has real educational value," he said. "You can help attorneys better advise their clients about protecting property rights and dealing with HOA abuse." I agreed and found myself standing in front of about 100 attorneys at a conference center in Phoenix, telling the story of Linda Crawford, the contractor, and the survey stakes that saved my property. The attorneys asked thoughtful questions about documentation, legal procedures, and how I had navigated the HOA complaint process. Many of them took extensive notes. After the presentation, several attorneys approached me. One of them, a woman named Rebecca Torres, had a particularly interesting perspective. "Mr. Johnson, I specialize in HOA law, and I see cases like yours more often than you might think," she said. "The problem is that most homeowners do not know their rights, and they are intimidated by HOA boards. Your case is remarkable because you had documentation, you stood firm, and the contractor you dealt with had integrity. Any one of those factors being different, and Linda Crawford might have gotten away with it." Her words sobered me. How many homeowners had lost property or been scammed because they did not have a survey? How many contractors would have just followed the HOA president's instructions without question? I shared Rebecca's comments with Mr. Martinez the next time I saw him. He was doing some work on another house in Oakwood Hills, installing a new front door. "She is probably right," he said thoughtfully. "I know contractors who would have moved your fence and not asked questions. They would have figured the HOA president knew what she was doing, and it was not their problem to verify property lines. But I was taught early in my career that you always verify before you do anything that affects property boundaries. My father was a contractor too, and he drilled that into my head. Check twice, cut once, he always said." "Your father taught you well," I said. "He did," Mr. Martinez agreed, "and because of that lesson, I avoided a lawsuit, kept my license clean, and helped stop a criminal. Not a bad outcome for just asking to see survey stakes." That evening, I reflected on how many people had played crucial roles in stopping Linda's fraud. The surveyor who had professionally marked my property when I bought the house, Mr. Martinez, who refused to do work without proper verification, the HOA board members who called an emergency meeting instead of covering for Linda, the forensic accountant who uncovered the embezzlement, Detective Morrison who built a solid case, the prosecutor who pursued justice, the jury who carefully considered the evidence. It took a whole system of people doing their jobs with integrity to hold one person accountable for abusing power. And it started with orange survey stakes and a contractor who asked to see them. 3 years after Linda's arrest, the Oakwood Hills HOA was thriving. Property values in the neighborhood had actually increased because of the improved community atmosphere and professional HOA management. The reputation of the HOA had transformed from a cautionary tale to a success story about reform and accountability. I was elected to the HOA board myself that year, serving as treasurer. Thomas Baker, who had held the position during the Linda Crawford crisis, was ready to step down and suggested I take over. I was hesitant, given my previous conflicts with the HOA, but Robert Chen convinced me. Derek, you understand better than anyone how an HOA should not operate, he said. That makes you exactly the kind of person we need on the board. As treasurer, I implemented additional financial safeguards. Every expenditure required dual signatures. Monthly financial reports were posted on the HOA website for all residents to review. We hired an independent auditor to review our books quarterly. I was determined that no one would ever again be able to embezzle from Oakwood Hills HOA. During my first year on the board, we received an inquiry from a doctoral student at Arizona State University who was researching HOA governance and accountability. She had read about the Linda Crawford case and wanted to interview me and other board members for her dissertation. Her name was Jennifer Wu, and she was studying how HOAs could implement better oversight mechanisms to prevent abuse. We spent several hours talking about what had happened, what we had learned, and how we had reformed the organization. Your case is fascinating because it started with a property dispute, but revealed much deeper corruption, Jennifer said. And the community's response, removing the president and implementing real reforms, is actually quite rare. Many HOAs either cover up problems or collapse into infighting. What made us different? I asked, genuinely curious. Several factors, she said, consulting her notes. First, you had clear documentation that proved wrongdoing. Second, you had board members willing to take action rather than protect the president. Third, you involved law enforcement when criminal activity was uncovered rather than trying to handle it internally. Fourth, the community came together around reform rather than just punishment. That combination is powerful and uncommon. Her dissertation was published the following year, and Oakwood Hills was featured as a case study in successful HOA reform. The ASU College of Law even developed a seminar on HOA governance that used our experience as a teaching tool. Linda Crawford served 3 years of her 4-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard about it through the victim notification system. I was not sure how I felt about her being out of prison. Part of me was still angry about what she had tried to do, but another part of me just felt sad about the whole situation. She did not return to Oakwood Hills. According to public records, she moved to Tucson and took a job in retail. Her husband, who had divorced her during her incarceration, had sold their house in the neighborhood and moved away. I hoped she had learned something from the experience, but I honestly did not know if people like Linda were capable of genuine change. What I did know was that Oakwood Hills had changed dramatically and for the better. We had transformed from a neighborhood ruled by fear and petty enforcement into a genuine community where people looked out for each other. The HOA was no longer a source of stress, but rather a helpful organization that maintained our shared spaces and organized activities that brought us together. 4 years after the original incident, I was standing in my yard at the exact spot where Linda had tried to convince Mr. Martinez to move my fence. My survey stakes were still there, orange caps bright in the Arizona sun. I had replaced the caps a few times over the years as they faded, wanting to keep them visible and maintained. Jim Patterson, my neighbor, walked over with his dog, a friendly golden retriever named Copper. "Morning, Derek," he called out. "Working on the garden?" "Just checking on my survey stakes," I said, gesturing to the markers, "making sure they are still clear." Jim smiled. "The famous survey stakes. Carol and I joked that those should be on a historic marker or something." "On this spot, orange survey stakes saved a community from corruption." I laughed. "I do not think they give historic markers for survey stakes." "Maybe they should," Jim said. "You know, Carol told me that at least 5 other homeowners in the neighborhood have gotten professional surveys done because of your experience. People want to know exactly where their property lines are, and they want documentation to prove it." "That is smart," I said. "It is not even just about fraud prevention. It is good to know exactly what you own when you buy property." We chatted for a few more minutes before Jim continued his walk with Copper. After he left, I stood there thinking about how one moment, one decision, could have such far-reaching consequences. If Mr. Martinez had just moved my fence without checking the survey stakes, I might have lost part of my property without even realizing it. Linda might have continued her schemes indefinitely. The HOA might still be a source of fear and resentment instead of community pride. My phone rang. It was Marcus Feldman, my attorney. "Derek, I'm calling with some interesting news," he said. The State Bar's Real Property section wants to give you an award. An award for what? I asked, confused. For your advocacy in property rights protection, Marcus explained. Your case and your willingness to speak about it publicly has educated thousands of homeowners about their rights. The bar wants to recognize that contribution at their annual dinner next month. I was stunned. I just protected my own property? I was not trying to become some kind of advocate. Maybe not intentionally, but that is what you became, Marcus said. By standing up for yourself, documenting everything, and sharing your experience, you have helped a lot of people. That deserves recognition. I attended the State Bar dinner the following month, feeling completely out of place in my rented tuxedo among hundreds of attorneys. But when they called my name and I walked up to accept the award for property rights advocacy, the applause was genuine and warm. The president of the Real Property section, a distinguished attorney named Harold Jameson, shook my hand and said, "Mr. Johnson, you have done more to educate homeowners about property rights than many attorneys manage in their entire careers. Thank you for your courage and persistence." The award sat on my mantel at home, a small plaque that read, Arizona State Bar Real Property Section Community Advocacy Award Derek Johnson for exceptional dedication to property rights education and protection. But the real award was not the plaque. It was living in a neighborhood where the HOA worked for residents instead of against them. It was having neighbors who trusted each other and the board. It was knowing that my property was secure, clearly marked, and legally documented. It was being part of a community that had faced corruption, confronted it, and emerged stronger. 5 years after that morning when Linda Crawford showed up with a contractor to steal part of my property, I was sitting on my back patio with a group of neighbors. We had started a tradition of monthly backyard barbecues, rotating houses each time. This month, it was my turn to host. Robert Chen was there with his wife, along with the Pattersons, Mr. Martinez and his wife Rosa, whom I had invited after becoming friends over the years, and several other neighbors, including young families who had moved in recently. One of the newer residents, a man named Kevin Foster, who had bought a house 6 months ago, asked the question that everyone who moved to Oakwood Hills eventually asked. "So I keep hearing references to the great HOA reform and something about survey stakes," he said. "What is that all about?" The longtime residents all looked at me and grinned. I took a sip of my iced tea and said, "Well, it starts with a woman named Linda Crawford and a contractor who refused to move my fence." I told the story again, as I had told it many times over the years, but I never got tired of telling it, because the ending was always the same. A community that came together, held corruption accountable, and built something better. When I finished, Kevin looked thoughtful. "That's incredible. So basically your survey stakes and a contractor with integrity saved the whole neighborhood." "Pretty much," I confirmed. "I'm getting a survey done on my property tomorrow," Kevin said. "I want orange stakes just like yours." Everyone laughed, but Kevin was serious. And he did get a survey done, and so did the next family that moved in, and the one after that. The orange survey stakes became something of a tradition in Oakwood Hills, a visible reminder that property rights mattered, that documentation protected you, and that standing up to corruption was worth the fight. As the sun set over the desert that evening, painting the sky in brilliant colors, I looked around at my neighbors laughing and talking in my backyard. This was what community was supposed to feel like: safe, supportive, built on trust and mutual respect. And it all started with a contractor looking at orange survey stakes and saying, "Madam, I cannot move a fence that is legally placed on private property." Those words had changed everything. They had stopped a crime in progress. They had exposed corruption. They had given me the evidence I needed to fight back. They had set in motion a series of events that transformed an entire neighborhood. I thought about Linda Crawford sometimes, wondering if she ever reflected on how different things could have been. If she had just focused on genuine community improvement instead of petty enforcement and fraud, she could have been a good HOA president. She had energy and organizational skills, but she let power corrupt her, and she paid the price. The legal system had held her accountable: prison time, restitution, a criminal record. But in some ways, the greater punishment might have been seeing what Oakwood Hills became after she left: a thriving, happy community that functioned better without her than it ever had with her. That had to be a hard pill to swallow. But that was her burden to carry, not mine. I had my own life to live, in my house, on my property, within my clearly marked survey boundaries. I had my community, my friends, my role on the HOA board where I tried to ensure that our organization served residents rather than controlling them. As the backyard barbecue wound down and neighbors started heading home, Mr. Martinez pulled me aside. "Derek, I never properly thanked you," he said. "Thanked me for what?" I asked, confused. "For having those survey stakes," he said with a smile. "For having documentation, for making it easy for me to do the right thing. I have told a lot of people over the years that I refused to move your fence because of the survey stakes. But the truth is, if you had not had those stakes, if you had not had that documentation, I might have been in a tough spot. I might have moved that fence thinking the HOA president knew what she was talking about. You made it easy for me to see the truth and stand my ground." I clasped his shoulder. "You would have done the right thing regardless. That is who you are." "Maybe," he said, "but having clear evidence made it a lot easier." After everyone left, I walked out to my property line one more time. The orange cap of the survey stake glowed in the last rays of sunlight. Such a simple thing, a plastic cap on a metal post, but it represented something important: property rights, legal boundaries, the rule of law. In a world where people could abuse power, where HOAs could become petty dictatorships, where corruption could flourish unchecked, these little markers represented a line that could not be crossed, not without consequences, not without accountability. I reached down and touched the orange cap, feeling the warm plastic under my fingers. 5 years ago, this survey stake had saved my property. It had exposed fraud. It had changed my community. And it stood as a reminder that sometimes the smallest things, properly maintained and clearly marked, could make all the difference in the world. As I walked back to my house, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for professional surveyors who did their job properly, for contractors who refused to do shady work, for HOA board members who chose accountability over cover-ups, for detectives and prosecutors who pursued justice, for a legal system that, when properly applied, protected property rights and held the corrupt accountable. But mostly, I felt grateful for those orange survey stakes, still standing after 5 years, marking the boundaries of my property and reminding me that sometimes standing firm in the right place, properly documented and clearly marked, was all you needed to do. The rest would follow.